Welcome everyone to the Think Chatbot number 9. Today you have the pleasure of meeting me, Alex. I'm one of the founders of ubisend, and I tend to run these webinars and training sessions with everyone on every Tuesday, 1 o'clock UK time. And as usual, I'm joined by Jacob. Do you want to say hi, Jacob?
Hi everyone, nice to see you all again.
Welcome. I'm very happy to see everyone joining the chat. As usual, we're going to go through a couple of bits at the start. So we're going to explain what we're going to build today. What we try to do is build basically a bot within about 45 minutes, sometimes a bit shorter than that, using obviously the ubisend platform, and show you exactly how we do it. We pride ourselves in being able to use obviously the platform very well, and the platform is very user friendly. And so anything that you guys throw at us, basically week after week, we try and build, unless it's something completely crazy, which we have to field sometimes. Every now and then there are really crazy builds that are being requested. If we can't do it in 45 minutes, we tend to basically not do it straight away. We might do them into parts later on. But so what we tend to do is we have Jacob tell us what he wants us to build today, and then we'll have a look at a little graph or a little chart that explains the flows. And then we'll dive into the platform straight away. We take questions throughout the entire session. So if you have anything, just raise your hand using the tool. Obviously, don't do this in front of your computer. We won't be able to see you. And just ask your questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom app, and we'll be able to pick it up. And if there's anything that we haven't answered throughout the session, just feel free to obviously send us an email. Jacob's going to send every attendee an email after the session. And so just respond to that with your question, and we'll be more than happy to have a look. So Jacob, what are we building today?
Okay, perfect. So today is another kind of viewer or audience submitted one. It actually comes from one of our clients that watched a previous episode, and they had essentially a few support processes in place, and they'd also just released a new wellbeing support. With it being 2021, I think wellbeing is quite at the top for a lot of different HR professionals, kind of keys and like the trends that they want to be putting in place. And what they wanted to do was kind of update their chatbot to include the wellbeing support and kind of show people that there's a few different options that they can go down and show that HR is there for them, both as an employee, but also maybe sometimes outside of work. And so what we've done is I've taken the kind of process that they were thinking about and added it onto a mirror board, and then kind of added in a few little things extra to show off a little bit of the chatbot platform.
Okay, great. So we're not completely starting from scratch. There's going to be something there as far as structure of the bot already.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, because it kind of fits in a little bit nicer with how they were doing things, and I think it shows off a couple of examples of using the platform in the real world rather than just starting up from scratch every time.
Okay, perfect. We'll do as usual and turn off our cameras so we can focus on what really matters, which is obviously building the bots. And yeah, we'll see you in 1 second.
So now we've got the mirror board in front of us. As if you're a regular viewer, you'll know that this is basically where we kind of designate the chatbot's flow, the different steps that the chatbot conversation is going to have. And as we mentioned at the start of the call, this kind of conversation already takes place in a semi-built chatbot. So we're going to be utilizing examples of a chatbot that's already got a few steps in place, and how you can then add something onto those to continue expanding on your offering. So at the top there, we've got HR wants to add a wellbeing support to their list of chatbot support conversations. So they've previously already had, I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but I believe it was say IT support, financial and payroll support, that kind of thing. So the more typical support options you can say. But then obviously when they're adding wellbeing, they want this to update this list to include wellbeing. And then the chatbot's going to want to be able to identify the wellbeing issue that the employee is facing. And then it's also going to be able to offer either in-person support options or direct to resources. So the in-person support options that the client had is either kind of say getting in touch with a counsellor or sharing pre-approved wellbeing resources so that they know that everything that's being shared is things that they are happy with. And you'll also notice as well, we've just got off to the right there, there's also a send to bullying and harassment conversation. This was quite a big thing for the client where they did have an existing bullying and harassment conversation, and they realized obviously some things to do with wellbeing may so well cross over into that. So what we've got here is actually a pre-built conversation that we're going to be able to direct users to from the conversation we're just creating at the moment. I hope that's made sense. I'm always very bad at complicating these things a little bit more than they need to be. But just to kind of give a final little recap there, at the bottom, obviously, we've got the outcome. So by the end of this session, we're going to be able to have directed users through multiple different conversations and updated existing conversations, and also streamline the contact a counsellor process.
No, this is great. I think So we always take these sessions as sort of a live workshop, really. So there's no right or wrong answers. So we go through this process ourselves. You've obviously spent some time preparing for this, which is really good. And I'm going to see this for the first time. So it's sort of going to be what real life would be like if you had a ubisend account and your boss or your colleague said, "Oh, we really need to add this thing into the bot." So this is kind of a step in between from actually building the bot for your first time. Or last week we did something around analyzing data, which is obviously sort of the last step of what you like to do with the bot, which is analyzing the data and making sure that everything is working properly and taking some insights from it. Here we have this almost mundane day-to-day thing where, oh, we really need to add this new thing into the platform. How easy can it be to actually do this? So this is quite cool. You did add the outcome section as well, which I think is really good for future viewers. This is session 9, and this is the first time we've actually added an outcome section here, which I think is really valuable for people watching, because you'll see what we're really going to go through during this session. Okay, so if I understand correctly, if I go into the platform now, you will have had created a some sort of way of entering the conversation. You'll have created one bullying and harassment conversation. Is that correct?
Oops, sorry, my voice is just down on me there. Yeah, exactly right. So I've created an FAQ, which for people new to the platform is basically kind of a quick answer, a quick question and a quick response section, where this will then be directing people to the initial support options the client already had in place, which is, say, for example, technical support. And I've also created the bullying and harassment full-blown conversation within the conversation builder, which will be directing people to. So just to give a little recap there, from the FAQ, we're going to be adding a new option, which will take them off to a separate conversation. And then within that new conversation we're going to create, we'll also be directing to a pre-existing conversation.
Okay, cool. So we're not going to go through the FAQ creation process because I think we've covered that at length in previous sessions. So make sure you go back and watch these videos if you haven't seen them. But what I can just do quickly right now is have a little play with the bot as it is right now. So this is obviously bot, we just called it Think Chatbot number 9. So this could be your name of the name of your company, or a clever name that you want to give your bot. All of this branding and coloring and everything can be tweaked to your requirements as well, which is always quite nice to know. And so as a brand new user here, I'm in the demo section of the platform, which allows me to test my bot before actually putting it live, which is obviously very helpful. In this demo section, it's always going to mimic the user coming to this bot for the very first time. So it doesn't know who I am. It doesn't know what I want. It doesn't know anything about me. Which is why it just says, "Hi, what can I help you with? What can I help you with today?" And so here, what I've just done is pick up the FAQ that Jacob has created beforehand, and just throwing it at the bot to see what Jacob has built. So this would be the situation if I was just told to add something into the bot. I would probably just go and have a quick cursory look at what's been done, how the experience currently is happening, and then see where I would change things. So in this instance, obviously, an employee would go to the HR bot and just sort of say, "How can I get support? How can I get any help? I need help for something." And so the bot just responds, "I can direct you to a range of support options. What type of support do you need? IT or technical, payroll or finance, skill progression." So these are the 3 options we currently have available. And obviously, throughout this session, we're going to add a new one, which is this very box here, which is update current options to include Wellbeing. So we're going to add basically another option in this 3-sprung option for Wellbeing as well. Couple of bits to show here, I think could be valuable to show you. So this is an FAQ. So an FAQ is obviously, as its name implies, it's a question and answer type of approach. This is usually the core knowledge base of your bot. So your bot will be made up of one core knowledge base of FAQs. That could be 50, 100, 200, 500 FAQs that your bot is well trained and taught to recognize and answer, with answers that you have personally, or not necessarily personally, but your team has written into the platform. So the bot doesn't sort of come up with answers by itself, which that would be a bit scary. What we do instead is you map all of these things yourselves initially, and the bot over time learns to answer different variations of the same question with the right answer by mapping all sorts of intents and utterances in the back end, which we're not going to necessarily go into right now because it's a bit technical. What's quite interesting here is Jacob has turned on the was this helpful feature, which you can turn on or turn off as you wish. The was this helpful feature basically asks for some feedback from the user after the bot has answered an FAQ. So this is typically very, very helpful when the bot is first released, because it teaches the bot to know whether the answer that it has provided to the user is actually the right one or the wrong one. And so you can sort of think of this as almost a +1 -1 type of approach, where, well, this was really wrong, you shouldn't have said that, you should have said that, you should have said that, etc. And so over time, that sort of helps the bot learn. What happens as well is if I say no to the was this helpful, you can create some sort of conversation in the back end of that that's just going to take the user into a bit of a process to say, okay, sorry, I couldn't help. Would you like me to put a human on the case? Because evidently the bot couldn't manage it. So I just wanted to point that out, because I think this is sort of the first time that we see this in one of the Think Chatbot sessions. So this is quite interesting. All right, cool. So what should we do first? Build the conversation potentially?
Yeah, I think let's build the conversation, get that nicely fleshed out, and then we'll start kind of adding on the extra additions and putting it in its place.
Okay, great. So that leads us nicely to, I just mentioned the FAQs being this knowledge base, this core knowledge base of your bot. This layer around that would be these processes or these workflows that you build within the ubisend platforms. So the ubisend platform is obviously very, very helpful for you to build conversational processes. So anything that you have as part of your HR department, for instance, or any other, could be customer service or sales or anything like that. Anything that you know is a set in stone process, even if very complex, can be turned into a conversation within the platform. And so what we're going to do now is basically use this feature to create a conversation around asking for well-being support. Cool. So here I'm in the conversation builder section of the platform, which is basically where you create these flows, these workflows. And so I'm going to create a new conversation here, which is the well-being conversation. So what's this conversation going to do, Jacob?
So it's just going to direct employees towards different wellbeing support options, for example, either getting in touch with a counsellor or proper resources.
Okay, resources or get in touch with counsellor. I always struggle with that word. I am a bit foreign, so I'll allow it. Cool. So obviously naming the conversation, naming the workflow, always very helpful. Describing it, always very helpful. Again, you want to put yourself in the mind of, I'm just giving this task to someone else who may not have built this initially. You want to obviously provide some sort of quite thorough description of what this workflow is going to be to help them manage this account later on. Okay, so what's the trigger here?
So as this is going to be coming off of a different conversation, or an FAQ, I should say, I think the trigger was going to have to probably be revolving around a postback button, which is going to take a little bit of explaining. But a postback button essentially means, if you remember from the FAQs that Alex was showing earlier, when you say click one of those buttons, it will trigger something in the back end to say direct to this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess taking a step back, within the ubisend platform, you can create obviously as many conversations as you'd like. I shouldn't say obviously, because a lot of platforms actually limit you in the number of conversations you can create, but we don't. We pride ourselves in just letting you create as many as you'd like. And it's important to realize that every single workflow or conversation or process, however you want to call them, needs to start with a trigger. And the trigger is just an event that happens within the bot or outside of the bot to actually trigger this specific workflow. So these triggers are sort of listed here. So I'm not going to go through all of them because I tend to do this at every single session. But I do know that every time there's about 25 or 30% of people joining these sessions that are completely brand new to the platform. So apologies for the other, can't do the math, 70 to 60, 65% of people who've heard me say this every single week. But essentially, these events are all listed here, and you can use all of them and variations of them to actually trigger the conversations. And these could be simple things like a very specific message, or hitting a very specific URL on your website or on your platform. An API request, so that would be an example of something external that triggers a conversation. And then all sorts of other things like subscriber is stuck, or it returns to the bot, or all that sort of stuff. What we tend to do for these sessions, because they are sort of workshops and we try to keep them quite short, is we try to use messages. because it's just usual, quite quick for us to build. But even if I just go into the message as pick that as an event, you can see that there's event types here that are really, really complex again, or in depth. So I can do all sorts of things here. So if someone sends a message that's an emoji, for instance, I might want to create some sort of conversation around that, which I don't know what I would create, but that could be something. Or if someone sends a message that is a number that's greater than, less than, etc., etc. Anyway, all this to say that what we tend to do for these workshops is we tend to tie conversations to postbacks, which is a very specific, almost code-like piece of text. So in here, if the message is equal to, what do you want it to be, Jacob?
I think just wellbeing_support.
Wellbeing_support.
This is obviously a message that a user's never going to type themselves.
Precisely. So that's the important part of this. So the postback is something that's happening in the background of using the bot. So it's not something that someone is going to have to type themselves, because that would be crazy. What people will actually type is the natural language sentence, which is going to pick up that FAQ that we discussed earlier. And then from that FAQ, they'll probably pick one of these buttons, and that's going to basically trigger this conversation. What I could do is I could add more events here, and I could just do another one that is contains well-being, for instance. And then if I do this, which is obviously very, very generic, sorry. Anytime someone sends a message to the bot that contains the word well-being, it's going to trigger this specific conversation. So obviously we don't want to do that, because that's quite all-encompassing. But it is an option. So you could have more words in here, or you could have more different ways of filtering and onboarding people into this specific conversation. All right. So for now, we're just going to do well-being support, wellbeing_support. All right. Conversation is built. So now we have this blank canvas, so to speak, to start with. So what we're going to do basically is we've already created the trigger, so we know how people will be onboarded into this workflow. So now we need to create the steps, the messaging steps that are going to happen. So Jacob, have you put together something for us to build in here? So is this it?
Yeah, so essentially, I'd say the last 3-4 options of that flow there is going to be what we're going to be building. So the first step is going to be along the lines of identifying the well-being issue that they are facing.
Okay. So what I did here, whilst Jacob was talking, was I picked the first message here, which is pre-built. The ubisend platform is just going to throw that in for you to start with, basically. And if you click options here, you basically get presented with a whole lot of options around this one message. So obviously you can give this message a name, which is absolutely just an internal name, which I've just written is identifying issue. So this is just going to help me manage this conversation later on. So what's this message going to say?
So this is going to be just asking users the different types of, so like what the actual issue is that they're facing. As I'm not a HR professional myself, I know I'm going to phrase this very badly, because this can be quite a tender subject and you want to have proper phrasing. So you're going to have to forgive me for my terrible phrasing here. But I think it's going to be along the lines of, say, like, I'm sorry to hear that. We have a, can you please give a little bit more information about the issue that you're facing? Just something nice and general there.
Okay. Would you be able to give me a bit more information about the issue you are facing? Okay, so what I've done here is I've obviously gone into the name of this step. I've renamed that step, and then I've gone all the way down to message content, which is obviously where you write the actual copy for the message. For this specific message, or for this specific step, what we want to go after is just a standard message. So this is literally just plain text. If I click on this, you can see that we have all sorts of other options, which could be images and videos and all sorts of stuff, which we may get into later on. But for now, all I want is a simple message. What I've done as well here is I've split up the message into two, which is always quite nice from a UX perspective. You don't want to just send a massive long message to a user all at once. So here I've just split it up in two, and I'm going to save this. All right. So what did you want to do with this step? Do you want to provide some buttons, or do you want to just leave it as plain text?
Yeah, I think that's quite nice, because I suppose this kind of comes down a little bit to personal preference in a way, because with something like wellbeing, it can be quite quite a broad subject, so sometimes having the plain text and allowing the users just to type their own response is important. But it's also, I think, as well, quite nice because in this particular thing, you might have an option where, say, the employee doesn't particularly want to share this information with the chatbot. So maybe we can throw in a few quick reply options. So they can either put something, say, such as stress, and then a few options, which also then include, I'd rather not say.
Okay, so I'm not going to use this because I think we can leave this as free text. But I'm just going to show you how this looks. So if I save this, basically what I've done here is I've provided some quick replies options below this one message. So this basically just allows the user to, with the click of a thumb, just move forward in the conversation. So like Jacob pointed out rightly, this might be a bit of preference on your end, which we tend to encourage using buttons when using precise language is very, very important for the process that you're automating. So in this instance, for instance, it might not be super relevant for us or for the bot to know exactly what's wrong with this person or what they're feeling to move them forward in the conversation. So it might be too personal. The difference between stress and depression, for instance, might be the different step you want to take them to after picking stress or depression might not be different enough to warrant creating different flows, for instance. But if you imagine, I don't know, ordering car parts or something like that, you could use the same process to do so. And there you want to be very, very specific with what you want to actually order. You don't want the item B when you need the item A. And so in this instance, in the car part ordering process, you want to actually provide buttons to the user because that removes a lot of the potential for misclicking or mistyping or any other issues that could happen here. So in this instance, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove these steps, but I just wanted to show you that you can actually use buttons as well, which can be quite cool. All right, cool. Saving this. All right, what's next?
So I think looking at this next, I think as you just brought up onto your screen there quite handily, we can now either start offering in-person support options or the option to direct to resources. But actually, as I say that out loud, I suddenly realized that we've slightly overlooked the step there where we'll be sending a user to a bullying or harassment conversation. Okay. So I think we'll probably need to put something in place so that they can choose that as an option if it should be an option, so that we can direct them there later on. Okay.
So that means we actually need to provide some steps here. So taking this, I guess this came from a client, isn't it? Yeah. From a user. Okay, so this particular user, they have already pre-built flows that we want to be able to send people to. So what we're going to need is these buttons that I was just talking about earlier. But because I've just shown you the quick replies, I'm going to take another type of buttons here, just to change things up a little bit. So. What are the options? So let's say depression support. Another one, what do you think?
Go with stress.
Stress support, and then bullying. And then do you have a specific?
I believe it's, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head now, bullying underscore and underscore harassment. Harassment is one of those words that I can never spell correctly.
Yeah, you have to help me here. Like this?
I'm looking at that. I believe that's correct. I'm sure we'll find out if it is or if it isn't later on during the video.
Okay, perfect. So what I've done here is I've changed this message type into an action message, which allows me to add buttons that will basically, when clicked, transfer the user to another conversation that's more relevant. So again, this sort of is up to you. You can do that. You don't necessarily have to do that. If you do have very specific flows that are tied to, let's say, depression or stress and bullying, then you'd obviously want to do that. If you don't necessarily have these and you're just sort of logging the information from the user about what's wrong with them to just forward them on to a human to take over, then you may not need to do that. You can just sort of let the free text do its thing. All right, so what's next then?
The client, I remember when I was speaking to them, they were saying that once they kind of gathered the kind of general reason for why someone was reaching out with this, what they like to do is actually just jump straight into offering support straight away. They just kind of want to make this as quick for the user as it can be, or the end employer, I should say.
Okay, so offering support. All right, so let's say a message is sent. So do we want to go with anything that's not bullying? Is that what we want to go after?
Yeah, I think for the purpose of this conversation, we'll go with any message apart from bullying. Obviously, say if you're building this yourself, like you mentioned, you might want to have specific conversations and specific routes for each one. But obviously, we are on a slight time constraint today.
Okay, so what I've done here is I've created a new step below this existing step that we just created. And what we're going to do is tell the platform what we want, how we want users to transition from the previous step we just created to the new step we're creating right now. This is how, this is what we call the transitions within the platform. And again, if you remember, if you were here at the start of the workshop, what we've done, I've gone through all of these events that you can use to trigger conversations, and you can actually use all of these events to transition as well. So to go from one step to the next, you can use any of these events once again. So here in this instance, what I've done is I've done, if a message is sent to the bot that is equal to, that is not equal to bullying and harassment, we're going to take them to this next step. Okay, so what do we want to say here?
So I think here we'll, I'm just thinking about the best way to offer their resources. I think it's probably going to be along the lines of we have either an on-site counsellor or a large range of support resources available.
Okay, so in this instance, what I've done is I've created, again, two messages here just to split things up a little bit. And obviously, we want to provide two different options here. And so we can do, what are we going to do? Let's do talk to counselor or self-help documents. Okay. All right. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, all makes sense to me so far. We're taking them through the conversation quite nicely.
Okay, so what we've done is we've created a trigger that is equal to this specific message. This trigger is going to start us off on this conversation, which is, I'm sorry to hear that. Would you be able to give us a bit more details about the issue you're facing? And then depending on which one they click out of here, so if they click depression or stress, they're going to move down into this specific conversation. They're going to stay within this conversation. If they click bullying, we already have a bullying conversation set up elsewhere, which we're going to have a look at in a minute. And so they are going to be taken to that other conversation. So when the message is not bullying and harassment, the bot is going to say, we're here to help. Would you like to speak to a counselor or get access to online self-help documents? And then again, we have these buttons that people can use, which can be quite helpful. So I suppose now we're going to capture some information if they want to talk to a counselor and send maybe a link or something if they want to get the self-help documents.
Yeah, I think you're bang on the money there.
Perfect. So talk to counselor. So this is the new step. And obviously we're taking from the offering support to this next step when a message is equal to, I can't type, talk to counselor. Okay, not a problem. When would you like to meet our counselor? Okay, so in this instance, what we want to do is obviously provide, so that's going to sort of depend on the actual requirements that your company has in terms of building this information gathering conversation. But in this instance, to make things a bit shorter and to make sure that we finish on time, I'm just going to sort of pretend that we already have all of the information that we need from the user, which is not much of a stretch because usually a chatbot like this would be integrated into your HR systems. So someone talking to the bot would already be sort of logged into to some sort of portal or into the platform. The bot would know this is John from sales who lives in London, etc. So it would have all of the information that it needs and their email address, their phone number, etc. And so in this step, you wouldn't necessarily always have to request all sorts of information from the user, but it's sort of up to you depending on what kind of process you want to go with. Here, in this instance, we're going to imagine that we're fully integrated into the software, the HR software, and we can just sort of immediately ask to book a meeting with the counselor. And so to do so, we can use the composer types, which allows us to basically present the user with a nice, easy to use date and time picker within the bot, which is really, really helpful. So when would you like to meet a counselor? Build that. And then we're going to do another step here, which is self-help document, self-help documents. And we're going to do when message is equal to self-help document. Okay, and so here we can use another action message, which could be not a problem. Feel free to click the button below to access all the documents you might want to review. Something like that. So self-help documents. And then we're just gonna, I don't actually have a URL in mind, so I'm just gonna do example.com. Okay, so obviously here you would put the actual documents. And so I can create this step now. Perfect. So what happens here is obviously we go down this particular step. We offer the user to either talk to a counselor or get self-help documents online. And so depending on what they pick, they go down one route or the other. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add, no, I think it's 33 parts. So let's have a look at what we've built, and then we'll try and connect everything together. Does that make sense? So we should go and have a look at the bullying and harassment conversation you built previously, which is here. So this last conversation here is the one we just created together. This conversation here just above it, which is 5 steps long, is the conversation that Jacob has created beforehand. So this conversation starts with the trigger, which is again similar to what we just done. Bullying and harassment. Did the incident happen to yourself or another colleague? So you can report to me, another colleague, me and another colleague. When a message is sent, so just moving the user down this conversation, was it an isolated incident? Yes, or it happened multiple times. Would you please provide an explanation of what happened? And so if someone says, I'd rather talk to a human about it, this seems to trigger live chat, which is a feature that's within the platform as well. And if they provide any other information, the bot just responds, okay, could you give me the name of everyone involved? All right, so to connect these two conversations is super easy. So if I go into the conversation trigger here of this particular conversation, we can see that the trigger is actually this bullying underscore and harassment underscore, which I do believe is the one we used for this conversation. So it should be completely fine, but we can have it.
That's testing my memory a little bit there, but I'm hoping it is.
Exactly. All right. And so this is precisely what we put in. So perfect. So clicking this button is going to send us to the other conversation. That's perfect. Now, the last step we want to take here is go into the FAQs. And we want to update this FAQ. So if you remember correctly, this FAQ at the moment doesn't include the step that we actually just built. So where can I get support does not appear in this list. So we only have IT, payroll, and skill progression. So what we want to do is go back into an LP FAQs and update this. So I want to update the answer. So obviously the questions and the different variations of that questions doesn't really need any updating, but what we do need to update is a new well-being option. So well-being support, and we're going to say, what was it? Well-being support.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, with an underscore there. Yep, perfect.
Perfect. And so now I've added this step. I can save this, and I can go back to here. Where can I get support? Okay, and this well-being support is right here. Little sip of water. Okay, so let's go and try and have a look at this. Hopefully, if we build this properly, it should trigger the well-being support conversation we just built, which says, I'm sorry to hear that. Would you be able to give me a bit more information about the issues you're facing? So if I say depression, it should take us to the next step. It says, we're happy to help. Would you like to speak to a counselor or get online self-help documents? I'm happy with self-help documents. Okay, no problem. Feel free to click the button below to access all of the document you need. Perfect. So we've gone through this whole conversation. So you have to imagine that this is someone logging into the platform that just says, I need some help. And they just express that they have some well-being issues. They're going through this whole process of going down this workflow, telling the bot that they have potential depression issues, and they have now received the help that they feel is right for them. So this is all completely automated. What I can do now is I can go through another branch of this whole conversation. So again, triggering this FAQ, which doesn't need to be exact match here. So that's very, very important to remember. This could be all sorts of variations. I'm just copy pasting it just to make sure that we're moving forward here. So obviously still need well-being support, but this time I have bullying and harassment issues. So this is clicking this particular button is taking us to the other conversation that Jacob has created before. Did the incident happen to you or another colleague? To me? It's moving me down this process. It was an isolated incident. I'd rather talk to a human about it, which should trigger the live chat. Okay, so an agent should be with you shortly. So now this is waiting for an agent to jump in. Let's reset this and do this again. All right, well-being and support. So this time, what do I want to do? I have stress issues, and I'd quite like to go and speak to a counselor. So I'm going to go and speak to a counselor. Not a problem. When would you like to meet the counselor? And here I can pick up a date and time that suits me. So I can do, let's say, Monday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah, perfect. And I'm going to send that. So now the bot is going to hit a dead end. As you can see, it says, sorry, I didn't understand. That's simply because I didn't finish this whole conversation. If you remember, about eight or so minutes ago, I sort of stopped and sort of had a little think. And what you would basically do is to wrap this conversation up properly is you would have some sort of integration here at the end of this particular branch that would take the information about, the issue that has been raised as far as these three options are concerned. And then the time and date, and take all of this information, integrate into some sort of calendar software or your HR software that your HR counselors keep an eye on, and then send all of that data across to book this actual appointment. But obviously we don't have time now to do all of this, so this is why it hits a dead end here at the end. But yeah, so we've basically taken this entire conversation, built a brand new conversation into a platform that already had multiple resources available to us, which is very, very likely that you're going to run into some sort of experience like this as you build your bot. It's always going to be, updating things as you go, and this is how you would do it. You do need to have a bit of knowledge of the platform and a bit of knowledge of what has been built before, so that you can actually efficiently build these new features in. But once you know how everything works, it's super simple. As you've seen, we've managed to build this whole thing in about 25 minutes, and I was explaining everything along the way. So as you can see, you could have done this in literally 10 minutes if you knew what you were doing. And now all of a sudden, I have a whole new workflow automated for my company. I can do all of this really nicely.
Yeah, indeed. I think just looking at this now, I think the client that I was originally speaking to would have been quite happy with this, because it's very similar to the process they had in house that we were talking through. Obviously, as well, they obviously had quite a few more different steps and a few more personalization options, because they weren't trying to run this all out within 35 minutes.
No, yeah, completely. And one of the things that we didn't go into is this FAQ is obviously all here by itself. This is just one FAQ. So the typical HR chatbot would have 50, 100, 150 FAQs working together to make sure that they provide all of the information that the users need. And so yeah, there's loads of stuff that you can do to improve this. This is just sort of a quick look at one process, yeah, it's just really cool to be able to just go into it, edit it, automate things, make sure that it's all working properly, connect the different dots between the different conversations, and make sure that the user experience is coherent across the entire thing. But yeah, that's the sort of stuff we quite like doing. So hopefully this workshop was quite helpful. Any questions or anything like that you want me to cover, Jacob?
And I think just one thing to briefly mention around with the integrations as well when we were speaking through them, I think it's always important to note, because I know this came up quite a few times in a few episodes we did not too long ago, that obviously with ubisend, like the integrations are pretty much unlimited to whatever you want really. So there's no kind of only within these 5 different softwares or out of the box or anything along those lines. It's whatever you fancy.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have time to go into the integrations right now, but in the ubisend platform, you can create, like Jacob just said, as long as a piece of software has an API that is accessible, we can connect into it. That means pulling information from that software or pushing information into it. We've built a tool internally that allows you to basically connect any APIs into our platform. So you just follow these steps, which may look a bit foreign if you have never done that yourself, but if any technical person is watching right now, you'll quickly realize how super simple this is. You just basically enter your details of the API you'd like to connect to, and you can create all of the different steps that you'd like to achieve within the bot integration. And so all of this is absolutely possible. And the purpose of doing it this way is that we don't necessarily know which software you're using as part of your company. And so instead of forcing you to use, a Workday integration, because that's the only one we could be bothered to build, what we've done is we've created a higher level integration tool that allows you to create your own integration into Workday, or any other software that we may not have heard of before. So this is extremely powerful, and certainly something I'd like to get into a little bit more in future workshops. But we do have a whole lesson around this on YouTube as well. So if you go into our quick start guide, which is about 7 or 10 short videos, I recorded an entire lesson around integrations, which could be very, very helpful if you're interested in that. Cool. Anything else you want me to cover, Jacob?
And I think that's covered everything quite nicely there today. And thank you as well, Alex, for doing one which is a little bit different there with a few pre-existing elements, kind of complicates things for a demonstration perspective a little bit more. So thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you everyone for attending. I noticed that there was loads and loads of chatter and questions and things that came to us, and we couldn't necessarily get through all of this. I'm sure Jacob has been monitoring, but if you have any other questions that we didn't manage to get around to, feel free to send us an email and we'll get around to it. And if you have any use case that you'd like us to cover in a future episode, feel free to send us a little pitch, and we'll review it. And there's a high chance, I can't talk anymore, high percent chance that we will work on it. So feel free to send that across. Thank you, everyone. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't yet and you're watching this on YouTube. And if you'd like to attend these workshops live to ask all of your questions and get to speak to us a little bit, they are hosted every Tuesday, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, UK time. And you can sign up to join on ubisend.com/drop-in. We'll be happy to have you. All right. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you, everybody. And sorry, I think my laptop sound cut out for a very brief second there. But anyway, thank you, everyone. And it's been a pleasure doing it with you always, Alex.